the moment Anna, the writer, upload a new chapter, within half an hour, we would get a 200,000 comments.
Wow.
So
Hey, what's up, guys? And welcome back to another episode of Ameer Approved. Today we have a real special guest, Eva Lau, Managing Director and Co-Founder of Two Small Fish Ventures. Now, before we get into her bio and onto the show, a couple of house cleaning notes. Number one, if you're watching this on YouTube, please make sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification. And number two, if you're listening to this on iTunes, I'd really appreciate a review because on the side note, I'm picking 1 to 2 lucky winners every single week to receive $20 in Bitcoin.
Wow.
Now, without further ado, our special guest for today, Eva Lau, which is a managing director and co-founder of Two Small Fish Ventures. Eva is a well-respected entrepreneur turned investor in Canada. Before starting Two Small Fish Ventures, she was Wattpad's head of community and content. She helped nurture and scale the Wattpad community from its infancy to becoming one of the largest online communities with tens of millions of monthly users around the world. That's pretty damn impressive.
thank you.
And one of the reasons why I have you on the show today is I actually want to talk about the journey
Okay.
with Wattpad.
Okay, happy to.
Yeah. First of all, how did you get involved with that? Like, tell us from the beginning.
Well, if that's the case, according to an article back in the Globe and Mail, it has to start, from the love story between me and Alan. We kind of trace back then. So Alan, the CEO and co-founder of Wattpad, we've met actually back in the days when we were in university. So it's been many, many years ago. And we started dating when we were still in school. And after we graduated, we, joined the workforce together. He was actually 1 year senior, so when he finished his master, that's when I finished my bachelor, and then that's how we joined the workforce. And since then, pretty much most of our career has been working together in the same company, different companies, but together. And it's always been tech. So now we trace back to the days in 2006. That's when he started Wattpad. The story goes like this. So he started a company, or he co-founded a company back in early 2000 called Theatrical Release, and it's a mobile gaming company that allows publishers to, develop games and deploy it on different mobile devices. We're talking about back in the days, early 2000s, when iPhone and Androids were non-existent. So he created, a platform for game publishers, to develop the game so that they can deploy it on multiple platforms. Back then, he already kind of prototyped an app that allows people, or namely himself, to read on a mobile phone. But we're talking about the screen size at that time was just so tiny. It's like 3 lines or 4 lines. We're talking about a Nokia candy bar here. So obviously it was totally not usable, so he parked the idea. And then at the time we were already married. And then fast forward to 2006. One day out in the blue, Yuen, who was the first developer at Theatrical Release, but he left a few years after and moved to Vancouver, instant message him and say, Alan, I'm working on a new business idea. I would like to get your feedback. Now, the backstory was while Ivan was sending him that instant message, he was kind of like thinking about what's going to be next for him after Theatrical Release, because in the gaming industry, he was not, really, into it, even though it's a company that he co-founded. But he just, felt that, what else can I make use of my skills in the mobile computing space and create something that he enjoyed? So in 2006, he resurrected the mobile reading app, because at the time, the Motorola Razr flip phone has a much bigger screen. So when he was kind of like playing with that project, that's when he got the message from Ivan. So he clicked on the link that Ivan sent to him through instant message. I'm like, boom. It's a mobile reading app. At the same time, Ivan even created a website that allows people to share their written words on the website so that they can download back on the phone and read mobilely. He was like, Ivan is one of the smartest person I've ever worked with. And if he and I are thinking about the same idea, we must be onto something. So he didn't really tell me about, all these thinking at the time, because I just had a newborn, my second child, and I was just finishing off my MBA. And, he was, there was a week that he had to fly to San Francisco for a speaking opportunity. I think it must be one of those Java Ones conference that he was there. I don't remember exactly, but he was away. And then he came back from the trip and said, I'm going to start this company with Ivan. I'm like, what? What company, what Ivan? When did you meet Ivan? Oh, I was meeting him in Vancouver. When I, before I fly back. I'm like, hold on a second. You were in San Francisco. How come you were in Vancouver? Oh, I took a detour before I come back. So I meet him up in the Vancouver airport in the food court, and that's how we decided to, start this business. I was obviously kind of like, are you crazy? Who's going to read?
This is 2006.
Yeah.
So 2 years before the
iPhone 3 came out. I was like, who's going to read on this phone? Right. But because my background has always been in tech, and even I helped startups in the early 2000s in an incubator, Brightspark Labs at the time, help entrepreneurs to figure out, how do they kind of like create the product, from idea phase to launching it and validating assumptions or try to find product market fit. So I knew that the startup space very, very well. Mm-hmm. So when he said that, I was like, I'm not sure like who's going to read on this phone. But if that's what you have the conviction in, sure.
So was it a foresight that you guys saw the evolution of the smartphone?
See, the thing is, I would say absolutely yes. Given that, we're talking about back in those days, we saw the leapfrog of mobile technology, specifically in the Japan market, in the Japanese market. Back then with the NTT, Docomo, people were reading on a very, very small phone, extremely small screen. But because Japanese people spend so much time on commuting, they do a lot of entertainment on the phone when they were commuting. So, Alan said, I create mobile games or help publishers to create mobile games. I see, how big the mobile market actually is. People are already playing games. We know the download numbers. We see all those kind of things. So we know that, the next computing platform will be on mobile phones.
Interesting. So you guys took kind of like a snapshot of the future in Asia and overlaid it to what's to come in North America.
In a way, yeah. In a way. And I think, back then, even, the before Tira Wireless, it was incubated from the Brightspark Labs. I was on the project briefly before it became a real company. At the time, I remember that, the over-the-air type transmission, that's what they call OTA. And, we're very in its infancy. And I would be talking to, or I should say, collaborating with companies like TELUS and Bell and, get their latest phones and have access to their network and say, like, can I just try it? I just want to see, what's coming in the future. That's what technology is all about. It's always about looking ahead, what's going to be coming and what kind of behavior do we expect people, to behave as technology matures.
Yeah, so it's not about creating new behaviors. It's piggybacking off pre-existing human behavior.
You know what? Human behaviors is always, I think it's quite constant. People think, people laugh, people have emotions. People need connections with others. They cannot be lonely. All these kind of like the creation of human, I don't think changes much over time. But it's how the technology around us make us behave some way so that it hopefully bring out the best of everyone over time. So obviously, if we're talking about human behavior, we're talking about like we were, before the show started, we were talking about, the Chinese history. And,
Yes.
I'm a Chinese. I certainly study, Chinese history, for the past, I've studied only for a few years, but his Chinese history was like, 5,000-6,000 years ago. If we look back time, like people have to weave, to get fabric, and people have to farm, to get food. Obviously, it's different, but the farming industry still exists. The textile industry still exists.
Different, same.
Exactly, So, people need to eat, people need to wear, people need to go from place to place. And the need is always there. But the mode of delivering that service probably will change over time.
Yes. And so when the version of Wattpad that we see today, was that the original idea, or was it a certain pivot that you guys made through your journey?
I don't think, pivot is the right word, but we certainly have grown since then. So, back in 2006 when, the Motorola Razr was the largest screen, ever available, there was no traffic. Like, who would actually read on that phone? And at the same time, Wi-Fi connection is not as prevalent as it is right now. You go into Starbucks and you have Wi-Fi right now, but back then we just didn't, right? So data plan was very, very expensive at the time. So obviously it was not going anywhere. It's only until iPhone 3 came out when the other technology like Wi-Fi and data plan become more mature, and all the handset manufacturers saw the iPhone 3 came out with a big screen. They were like, we have to have a big screen too. So like, even we're talking about back in the days, feature phones that are running Java, all of a sudden have like big and colorful phones. And then BlackBerry, they have to have their own big phones, with a big screen as well. And then eventually with Android, came into the market, everybody was looking for entertainment on the phone.
Yes.
So for us, given that Alan and Ivan both have very deep mobile technology experience, it was easy for them to just, capture that inflection point, I would say, in technology and bet heavily on mobile computing. And we did it right because 90% of our traffic actually came from mobile now. People even write on mobile phones these days on Wattpad, right? So have we transformed? Obviously, we captured the mobile computing space at the time and make us the leading platform for people to read and write mobilely. But at the same time, because that's when I joined them before the seed round in 2009. That's when I finally joined them because finally they had some meaningful traffic and that they can scale in a way. So scale meaning that they...
How were they acquiring this traffic? Was it like paid acquisition? No paid acquisition?
We actually spent $0.
Really?
Yes, I think even up till now.
Really?
I think Alan would be proud to say that he spent very little money in terms of actually, for pay acquisition.
So what is it, just word of mouth? Or?
So initially, how we started was obviously, there was no traffic. The famous story, if people, some of the audience may have read about it, is the monthly revenue in 2007 that we've got was $2 from Google AdSense. So it was only $3 away from break even. It was such a beautiful business, right? Hosting was only $5, and $3 away from break even is it was a pretty good company. So we just kind of like let it sit on its own. And at the time, Alan and Ivan actually had to have to start another company, to basically bring some money to feed the family. So when the iPhone 3 came out and all the feature phones all of a sudden have bigger screen and everyone are looking for entertainment on the mobile on their mobile phones, that's when we saw the uptick of the traffic. And that's when I joined them. When I joined them, because I'm an engineer, I work with startups, my DNA is really around product. Like, how do users use the product? How can we bring them on so that they can spend more time on it and tell their friends about it and make it more engaging? So me and Ivan spend a lot of time understanding user behavior, understanding what people are actually doing on the platform. Some of the writers initially, they just use the pseudonym. They wouldn't even tell their families and best friends about their stories.
It's like Reddit. Everyone just goes and finds it.
You know, they are just so secretive with their identity. So, you know, in a way, relying on the writers alone to tell the world, it was very, very hard, because sometimes it's like, I don't know if people like my story, so I don't know if I want to tell my friends. But what we found was that when readers read the stories they love, they are just so passionate about it. So we really try to kind of create a product to create this network so that the readers enjoy the stories, and they will be the ambassadors to go tell the rest of the world how great the stories are. And then the writers in return get the affirmations from the readers. They get more motivated to continue on with the stories. You know, take on the feedback from the readers.
So was it the readers sharing the stories? Like you guys integrated with other types of networks so you can syndicate it?
You know, simple things like, you know, sharing on social media. That's a given, right? Allowing people to go, you know, share also secretly, you know, through the email or through text message, even though it's not necessarily showing everywhere in social media, but that's still happening. So how we started initially, maybe I just kind of like, you know, rewind a little bit. When we first started the app, obviously it's empty. You know, you have to seed the network with something.
It's a chicken egg story.
It's a chicken and egg story. So let me tell you some funny story. I remember when I, you know, saw, you know, when I first, you know, moderating the community, I saw people uploading textbooks, like accounting principles and accounting definitions on the platform. Not, you know, kind of scan the pages, but it's kind of like, you know, what's the future value of money and what's the equation and all those kind of stuff. And I kind of like very baffled. I'm like, why would people upload something like this?
Yeah.
And then I keep looking at the data. Basically, it's only one user, but keeps going back at it all the time. So I kind of, you know, formulate a theory in my head. I'm like, maybe this guy is trying to cheat in their exam. That's how they can brain their note.
Interesting.
You know, on the mobile phone back in the days.
Yeah.
Right now it's more smart. You know, people are smarter that they say no phones allowed in the room. But I mean, back in the days, you probably wouldn't think about it, right? So I think, you know, in order to actually allow people to understand what Wattpad is all about, so we uploaded 20,000 stories from the Gutenberg project. So all the classic like Jane Austen, Charles Dickens, you know, Shakespeare's, they all up there. And this is a collaboration that we had with the Project Gutenberg. And so when people, you know, download the app either through Java or through you know, the iPhone back in the days, they would know that this is a reading and writing app. They would just say, hey, you know, come read your, you know, stories, come share your stories. So it's all about positioning about, you know, what this is all about. So that's how we started. But it took us, you know, a few years to get to the first original writer to come share on Wattpad. I still remember 2008, I think. The most popular writer on Wattpad, her pen name was called Red Flames. She was a 15-year-old girl from UK, and her story was read so many times that she can have 112 followers. It was a big deal.
I bet.
It was a big deal. So all of a sudden, you know, when people see such a behavior, I'm like, wow, she's the most popular, and she's now, you know, writing stories. Then you start attracting more writers, and then you start, you know, more readers. Because one of the things that we did, you know, in terms of SEO optimization was like, our search was free stories. So when people look for, you know, 3 ebooks, 3 stories, free books, then Wattpad automatically, you know, comes up quite high in the search results. Then people automatically download it and just try to check it out. So that's how we started the whole network.
That's impressive. And currently, what's your guys? How you guys monetizing everything on Wattpad?
Yeah, so, you know, going back to your questions, like, has it been pivot? And this is what I meant. So we started off as, you know, an app allow people to share, read and write, you know, storytelling. So obviously the initial monetization strategy was just eyeballs.
Sure.
It's very typical web-based, even mobile-based. The more people read, the more ads you serve.
Yeah.
That's how you do it. And so when we actually continue to grow our user base to the tens of millions, we find the whole advertising model, continue to evolve in such a way that brands wanted to partner with us. So they partner with us in multiple ways. They may sponsor a couple of writers and say,
sure,
write a love stories about when they are in Starbucks,
mm-hmm,
or write a story when they were having chocolate. Then all of a sudden, the brands have the opportunity to be like sponsoring stories, or they can just kind of like write the stories, have the brands being mentioned,
mm-hmm,
many times, and then some of them just kind of like sponsor reading lists. So they say, hey, Halloween is coming out. This is something very horrifying, and this brand wants to kind of sponsor the top 10, most horrifying stories you can read. And then all of a sudden, people start curating, and then the brand, kind of like label, layer their brands on top of these reading lists. So there are many ways the brands can engage authentically with the user base on our platform. And then, so that's another way of monetizing. Now, when we talk about what we're doing right now, people think that it's a pivot,
mm-hmm,
but I don't really think this third transformation is actually a pivot. It's a grow of what we are, we were building all along. So I think in 2012, 2013, that's when we first hired a data scientist in the company. And I remember working with him, and he was just experimenting with the data that we had. I remember, now I got to give you some context. When we were raising Series A, we're talking about 2010, 2011 timeframe, I was the one who worked with Ivan and Alan to pull out the data from the database. So I write the SQL statements. I'm like, show me all the writers,
mm-hmm,
all those kind of things. It was quite easy. The query was kind of long to run, but I could still do it. But then later on, when we had so much data, I put in a query, it just sits there for half an hour. It just sits there for half an hour. I'm like, wow, this is not gonna, help. So the data scientist came initially, was just kind of like helping us to restructure the database. But then later on, as we have massive data being gathered, we start investing in machine learning. So most recently, we are now, I should say maybe 2015. Yeah, 2015, 2016, that time frame. We saw a lot of our stories and being transformed into books and to TV shows
yeah,
and
I saw
to
that.
movies in the Philippines. So we, in 1 year, a few of the blockbusting movies in the Philippines were actually based on stories from Wattpad. And then one of the TV station actually reached out to Wattpad and said, can we do a partnership with you? Because we want to turn yours, the most popular stories on your platform into TV shows that we're going to show on primetime. So for a few years, actually, if you go to the Philippines, you will be able to watch half an hour every day at 8:30 a show called Wattpad Presents. So all those week-long episodes were all based on stories from Wattpad. So that is a very logical way of people thinking about, hey, you got up and rising stories, and now you got popular stories, and then we can put them into other medium like movies, TV shows, and books. Now, what we have been doing with the data scientists that we first hired, we started investing in machine learning. So now with the technology, what we call story DNA, we could understand a story far better than human, because every day we have about 500,000 of new chapters being uploaded on our platform. So far we have about 560 millions of stories have already been shared on our platform in like 50 languages.
Wow.
So like no one person can read the stories and kind of pick the winner. And if we pick the ones that are already popular, that is so obvious. So we invest in machine learning and created this story DNA technology so that we can understand the story better, understand engagement, daily engagement around the story far better, and we can predict the success of the story. I would say at least 12 months ahead before it becomes popular.
And so the writers who are writing this story, and for example, let's say I'm from the Philippines, this network, or anywhere else, and I want to use this writer's story. You guys are like the publisher that facilitates the arrangement.
Yes.
So me as a writer, I get a monetary gain.
Yes, when we started to actually develop programs to basically gather these up and rising writers with us so that we can actually help them monetize. So obviously turning stories into movies, TV shows, and books is one way of monetizing, but there are other ways to monetize as well. Some of them are actually, some of the stories will become paid content because they are they're very good, they're very popular. People are willing to pay, to basically show the gratitude.
For sure.
Towards the writers. So that's one way of monetizing.
Do you guys have an audio version that I can listen to?
Well, I don't think so right now, but that comes up many times.
I would pay for that.
Wow, I think so too. I think technology in the old days were very robotic when it comes to text to voice. So a lot of people kind of like, I don't want Siri to read me this story.
Yeah.
Right. So we certainly for that kind of like quality, you probably
I would make a JV deal with Audible. Right? Get the popular stories, get the writer benefit.
Maybe.
Right? Pick a good narrator.
We got to pitch it to Alan.
Pitch it to Alan.
Yeah. So now that with the story DNA technology, we then allowing the crowd and technology to help us uncover these up and rising gems and help them and to support the entertainment industry far better than just someone say, my gut is telling me that this script is gonna make money or this movie is gonna make money. I mean, if we look at the entertainment industry, what kind of movies or shows actually makes the most money? It's usually those ones that keep rerunning with the same brand, like the Star Wars, the Star Treks.
Yes.
And then all the Disney princesses that has been created in the last decades. It's always just milking on the old assets that they have. But with the Wattpad community, with machine learning, we are now allowing entertainment industries to basically build new assets that already has a built-in fan base.
But you, like any data sets, like machine learning is just pattern recognition, like filtering, filter 1, filter 2, filter 3, etc. It's still up to you to determine quantitatively what metrics matter, right? So you got all this data dump. It's like, let's query all our databases. It's like, okay, I'm like, what am I looking at? Like which, like for me, when I look at database, like what matters?
Yep.
I'm looking at all this data.
Yes.
So I would be interested, how did you guys determine, or what was the process in determining like what metrics matter to determine, this writer and these pieces, like within 6 months, are going to take off?
Right. So I think, from a very high level, we can only speak very high level right now. If you want to go a little bit lower, we should have the data scientists with you to go through go through the deep learning model that they've developed. But, in a very high level, think about it, for any stories, the journey of a story will probably be, someone wrote it, some people read it, and then, the people who read it will start sharing it with other people, and they will be waiting for the next chapter as they come up. Some people, as the new chapter come up, they will wait for God knows when. They say, I remember the story that I was reading. Have they updated yet? Let me go read it. Some people, if they're like really passionate about the story, the moment it get uploaded, they just kind of jumped on it. I remember one of the story that was on Wattpad that was so popular. It's called After. That's a very interesting story that I'm happy to tell you about. So when it was still in progress being written on Wattpad, the moment Anna, the writer, uploaded a new chapter, within half an hour, we would get a 200,000 comments.
Wow.
So
tell me the story.
That's a pattern.
I want to hear the story. It's a good story.
So Anna is a writer on Wattpad, and she started off as a reader. So she was bored, let me just read some stories, and she, get onto Wattpad and like, wow, this is very interesting. And then she started writing her own story based on the boy band One Direction, because at the time it was very popular, and he just found it fun to write the story. She started the story, I think, 2013, 2014 timeframe. Within a year or so, the whole story, she wrote the story, pretty much a chapter a day. Every time is a short chapter, so there were a few hundreds of chapters. That story garnered up till today, 1.5 billion chapter reads.
Wow.
6 million comments. And most recently, we have turned it into a movie, and the theatrical release was released in April this year.
Oh, this is what I saw. Yeah, okay.
So that was the story. So the first opening weekend, it was #1 in box office in 15 countries.
Wow.
And it is still, the best the box office indie movie, this year worldwide. And so it was released in April. And in July, when it came to the Teen Choice Awards, when, Taylor Swift got the awards and Ariana Grande got awards, all those Teen Choice Awards, in that awards, after actually won the best drama movie, the best movie male character, a male actor, and the best movie female actress. 3 Teen Choice Awards, alongside with all these superstars.
Were you guys responsible in the process of, okay, so there's a story after, and she's releasing chapters day by day, very super popular. Were you responsible for then determining how the production would happen? Because obviously, the awards, kudos to the actors and actresses.
Of course.
Right? So how did that process kind of work out?
Well, see, after it's one of the very first project that we took on in North America, even though we have many years of experience in Asia, particularly in the Philippines. So we are, after Cerny, it's one of the many that will come. So for after, the story, it's more about partnership. So when we discovered this story, we took it under our wings, and we started working with Anna. We basically choose our partners very carefully, to publish the books, and then we work with the movie production people, and obviously the entertainment industry is actually very complex. They're producers, they're executive producers, and then they're distributions, and then who's responsible for the marketing, and and then all of a sudden you have international rights.
Yeah, IP rights, this and that.
It's
I know.
a very, very, very complex project. And I certainly am not the best person to speak about the project. I think next time around, maybe you should actually invite Aaron Levitt, from Wattpad, who is the GM of the Wattpad studio, to tell you about that side of business.
Would love to.
Aaron would love to tell you more about that story. But basically, through these partnerships, it allowed us to leverage our partners' expertise to, take these stories into the big screen, and some of them, take them into the small screen. So one show is a Hulu show in the States. It's called Light as a Feather. We had 1 season last year, and this year we actually get in another season. So we leverage, the relationship and the expertise, with the Hulu network, and make it happen. So down the road, what the plans are. Are we going to be taking more responsibility through this process? I'm sure Aaron will be the best guy to tell you more about that.
Seems like you guys are becoming like a hive mind of pre-trends happening within the zeitgeist of culture.
Think about it. Yeah, right now, who are actually determining the pop culture these days? It's a teen, right? So what do they do? When they kind of like want to express themselves, a lot of them, they kind of like take pictures on Instagram.
Yes.
But a lot of them, they actually start writing stories on
Yes.
Wattpad. So we are a great gold mine in a way to kind of mine the data to understand what's up and coming. We often actually have early indicators of the next trend in the pop culture far sooner than anybody else. And so now that, with all these, story DNA, not only understanding the story, but actually understanding the engagement around it. So one way to think about it is like when a chapter comes up, how long do the people actually wait until they read?
Yes.
Those are totally measurable, right? So, that's how we kind of understand not only the story, the quality of the story, compare it, to some of the successful stories on Wattpad, but we also look at the engagement. The engagement is a key indicator. Think about it, if we look at just purely story structure, I feed the data, the data model with Jane Austen stuff, with Shakespeare stuff, and with no engagement data around it, you will probably think that the most popular stories coming up will very much like the Jane Austen and the Shakespeares. But if we layered the engagement data on top of it, like how soon people read it, how much engagement do they do it within the first hour, all these kind of metrics that are totally, letting the machine to kind of like figure that out. We can then determine, based on the fresh data, what's really up and rising. So right now we're partnering with a lot of the different entertainment industry partners to basically understand what's up and rising and allow them to work with us to produce the next generations of entertainment. So we have partnerships all over the world. We have partnership in South Korea, in Germany, in France, even in the North American market. We have a partnership with Sony and Sony Entertainment. So basically, we allow all these partners to work with us to uncover the up and rising stars in the entertainment industry.
Do you think, I don't know if you've been paying attention, but do you think the proposed 5G networks you guys are paying attention to that, how that might kind of play a role within the future of Wattpad?
I wish this question is more directed to Alan, given that I don't work at Wattpad, for a few years now that I'm a full-fledged VC.
The reason I bring it up, though, is I'm interested to see how the evolution from text into both audio and video kind of naturally progresses.
I think it's a very, if you ask me, it's a very natural progression, right? Think about, actually Alan published, his master plan on the internet, and people can just read it. And it was written, I think, back in... Where
can they find it? We'll put it in the show notes.
You can just go Google, okay. Wattpad master plan.
Okay. I'll put it in the show notes for people watching.
You should be able to read it. And basically, the whole idea is, initially we started off as an app allowing people to engage and read stories together. And then we, layered machine learning and, allow people to be even more social and read and write wherever they want. And now we have all these assets that are ready to go into the entertainment industry. What actually makes these assets successful in the entertainment industry are people loving it.
It's audience.
Yeah. Where do we have the audience? Wattpad has the audience. Yes. Right? These people are actually long awaiting for their most beloved stories to turn into books and TV shows and movies. So we have already got built-in audience. So who knows, maybe in another 10 years, Wattpad will be making these movies ourselves.
Yeah, Wattpad Studios.
And not only that, think about merchandising.
Of course.
All these lovely characters that people love, they may talk about the rings they have, or they may talk about the shoes they wear, or, maybe we'll be producing those merchandise as well.
And digital collectibles too.
Oh, yeah.
Those are going to be big.
Oh, yes. So, to go back to your questions, what is 5G is going to be doing it? I think, let me put it this way. I think this probably will be the best answer that I can give to you. Alan and Ivan are engineers. What have made Wattpad successful that is different than the traditional industry is that not only do we look at innovations in user behavior, enabling people to do more things, is they pay close attention to the technology innovations that's happening around them. Mobile technology, people think it's a norm right now, but back in 2006, it wasn't.
It wasn't, no.
Right? But then they betted on it. And when people were not necessarily being social on the internet and share things, we betted on that trend and believing that, YouTube people are sharing videos and watching videos, and Facebook people were kind of like creating profiles and, just chit-chatting on the internet.
But the key is you guys were riding the uptrend. You weren't
Yes.
too early. Because a lot of times if people
Yes.
go too early, like, oh, well.
Yeah. But at the same time, we recognize these trends, right?
Yes.
So that's why, when machine learning, certainly I wouldn't say in infancy, like machine learning it has been, since the 60s, long ago. But I'm talking about it's like when before it become the buzzword in the ecosystem, we hired our first data scientist in 2012, right? So we knew that, something is coming and we need to kind of bet on it. So when you ask me, in terms of 5G, from a technology innovation perspective, I think, is the infrastructure. So allow people to kind of like download things faster, more frictionless when it comes to going onto the internet and consume content. Certainly it creates a far more opportunities in terms of the richness of the content that any publishers can provide. So I would say that, the multimedia type entertainment consumption will probably be more prevalent when it comes to 5G.
It's interesting. I've been paying close attention to the growth of TikTok lately.
Yep.
It's fascinating. It's the first social platform I've seen in a very long time that's a direct threat to Instagram.
Yeah.
The user engagement you're talking about, the organic relationships people make with each other, actually knowing the creators, as opposed to like, for me, when I see like Instagram or something, it's very transactional. It's not, to me, it's not like I actually engage or I get to know the person that I'm following, right? But TikTok, for the first time, I felt like this, even though I'm not the main demographics, just from a bystander, I'm looking at this from a subjective outsider perspective, right? Of course. I'm like, this is fascinating. Of
course. I think, certainly, that's what I meant. It's like, for any new technology, it always kind of like started off with a niche group of users. And as soon as you kind of see the niche group of users actually, growing alongside with the platform and at the same time attracting the adjacent demographics, to kind of like gather on that platform, that's how you kind of see that the network is actually naturally forming.
Yes.
And I think that, nowadays, apps like TikTok, they spend a lot of money, to acquire users.
Oh yeah, they I think they bought out Musical.ly back in the day.
Oh yeah, they did exactly. And then they not only that, they acquiring users, to come onto the platform.
Well, they have to be aggressive.
They have to be very aggressive. Yeah. So those are all good, but at the same time, I think that the success of the app or any app, it's always kind of understanding the underlying desire of the users, especially when it comes to marketplace. There will always be supply and there will always be a demand. So now this is going to be going into a very interesting discussion now. I don't know if we're going to be like kind of detoured a little bit more. It's like, think about MySpace versus SoundCloud.
Yeah.
Both of them are targeted to the music industry or the artist, the musician, industry, right? Why MySpace have a difficulty? People obviously say, "Oh, because Facebook killed it," right? Yes, but at the same time, if it is so good in actually engaging the musician community, there should still be some ginormous community to allow people to engage with the musicians. But why is it not happening? Whereas if you look at SoundCloud, the engagement directly with the musicians may not be as, hey, how are you doing, Ameer? It's not necessarily like that. But the engagement actually gives the musicians far more visibility of their art or the engagement, with the audience better than MySpace. I think the difference is MySpace was putting musicians as the atomic unit, as the product feature that people,
the person
engage
itself.
Around it.
Yeah.
Whereas SoundCloud, the atomic unit, is one more level down. It's going right down to the music. So people are actually talking about the music rather than just the musicians. So think about, if you go onto a platform and and then there's an up and rising Justin Bieber on it. Not Justin Bieber, but an up and rising equivalent. Do you think that musicians want you to engage with him or engage with the music? And do you think the audience want to just engage with the musicians, or do you want the audience want to engage with the music? That to me is what I meant by product design, addressing the fundamental needs of the users. And that makes a huge difference. So I think, for any companies, TikTok, Instagram, Wattpad, YouTube, it's really understanding the intrinsic motivation of the users. What do they really want to achieve on the platform? Will the platform be able to, provide that service to satisfy that need? And if that need was only half satisfied, and if there's another platform coming up that really addressed the need, would you have a defensive mode?
Yeah, the mode's an interesting one. That's the biggest one going forward. And also if you can stay afloat. I know SoundCloud's having issues from monetization. Spotify wanted to buy them, and I think that deal fell through.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about this lately specifically, and before off air, you and I were talking about China and the economy there and, culture. And, we look at the major platforms. We have, in China, we have... what's
WeChat.
It called? WeChat. WeChat's crazy. If you guys haven't tried WeChat, like it's a universe.
Yes.
It's a whole universe.
Yeah, it's a totally different universe.
Yeah, it's crazy. But I look at YouTube here primarily, and it's a juggernaut, right? Google bought them for pretty much pennies on the dollar.
Yeah.
Like it's the cheapest acquisition ever. What,
1 billion.
It's like ridiculous.
Now it's not 1 billion,
No.
far more.
And so for me, it's like I kind of see the decline of YouTube recently. I've been on the platform since 2010. So it's been coming up almost 10 years, a decade. I'm curious as to, I find it, I want to say hard, but I find it really difficult to see how another platform can come around and kind of, I wouldn't say overtake YouTube, because this is a cognitive dissonance I'm having. I'll give Facebook as an example. You have, one Facebook gets Instagram, right? So you have Instagram, and now what's it called? WhatsApp, yeah. So they have this whole ecosystem to control, and like either or haven't really been involved into the potential. Like for me, I look at Instagram like this is it. In the last what, 8, 7, that's it. Like nothing really crazy. It was Snap, right? Snapchat that comes around, and creates new types of behavior. I want to say new, but creates incentives for different behaviors, right? With the stories and erasing videos. And then Facebook's like, well, if I can't buy you, since I have ungodly amounts of money, I'm going to copy you, right? So they start copying what Instagram stories, Facebook stories, yada, yada, yada. And then you, as a new and upcoming company, you don't have the Lindy effect. You don't have the money as Facebook does. You don't have the users, right? Facebook has pretty much free users. Their CAC ratio is probably, who knows, free.
Free. Yeah, exactly.
And so unless I'm getting funded by like SoftBank and I have like $500 million in funding to be super aggressive like TikTok does, I find it difficult to see how a new platform can come around and kind of dethrone, let's say, YouTube. Because if you and I create a new YouTube competitor, whatever, and we have really cool new features, like we understand a new subculture of psychology of users, but then YouTube's over here with like billions of dollars in the bank, and they're like, Eva and Ameer, thank you so much. I'm just going to take this feature now and implement it. That's kind of what I've been paying attention to recently, is how do new startups in this day and age of like Goliaths, like Facebook and like YouTube, kind of compete?
That's a very good question, because I ask that questions every day.
Yeah, well, you got your venture fund. We're the YouTube killer over
That's
here.
That's right. I have to look at it. It's like, are you going to share? You pitched to me about this and that. I'm like, are you sure? What if? I ask these questions all the time. I say, what if YouTube, or whatever comparable companies are going to be copying you and doing the same thing?
Yes.
Right. What I believe, if it is another copycat of something, it's difficult. So I have seen companies who've pitched to me and say, oh, we are going to be YouTube for fashion. So we will only allow, fashion bloggers to go on. I'm like, okay, but what's the difference then, to just go search for all the fashion bloggers on YouTube? What's the difference? There's no difference, right? So there are companies like, oh, we're going to be doing, a shopping app very much like Instagram. Then I asked, what if Instagram layer shopping options, which they do? So what's the advantage? So I think a lot of these kind of innovations, it's just a derivative of what some of the existing behavior is. It's extremely difficult to kind of break that mold that these ginormous company has created. Is exactly what you said. They have all these users, and they have all these money. If they want to just kind of like copy it and make it nicer, they can totally do it. So I think the innovation that I think will happen. It's only when people try to look at different behavior that people really need. So one of the things that I'm actually very interested in is blockchain. Someone is I wouldn't say pitching me, but we were casually talking, but I'm pretty sure there must be many projects out there right now on the blockchain that's doing this, is how do we use blockchain and make use of the consensus nature on the blockchain to actually fight fake news? Yeah, exactly. I haven't seen a good project yet, so I haven't made an investment on this one yet.
That's an Oracle problem.
That's an Oracle. Wow. But you know what I mean? So what I'm trying to say is that I am hoping, with some of the dissatisfaction right now on the current way of content consumption or social engagement or news consumption, and when all these discontentment, being married with new technology, maybe there's a new form of a product that actually really address those issues and allow people to behave differently.
I would agree. Like for me, I would actually look at monetization first. So we look at YouTube and I look at Google, and for me, I just look at an ad agency. It's an ATM machine for them, right? Mm-hmm. That's it, right? Put $1 in. What was it from, who said this? It was actually the former guy from Facebook. I forget his name, but he said I think for every VC dollar raised, 30 cents goes back to the FANGs or Google or something like that for ad cost, right?
Yes.
Facebook and Google.
That's why we have, companies to try to kind of combat that.
Yeah. So, in which I was super impressed when he told me almost you guys were doing almost free acquisition. Holy shit, this is amazing. Tell me the secrets. And, I look at that's a Web 2.0 type of monetization. It's very simple. We have the network effect, we have eyeballs, we have targeting. So ideally you can get your ads in front of the right users. And obviously, as the market matures, CPC goes up, CPM goes up, and it gets more expensive where only the big players can play, right? Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, paid traffic, whoever has the most money wins. That's it, name of the game. So for me, I'm like, okay, that's how the business makes money. That's its bread and butter. Mm-hmm. What happens if we come out with a brand new monetization system?
For whom? For the company or for those content creators?
Everybody.
Okay.
This is where I think the Facebooks and the YouTube can't compete.
Yes and no. Given that I have, helped build Wattpad, during its infancy, we have to face one tough question. Meaning I don't mean Wattpad, I mean people, innovators in general. It's money the only drivers to change people's behavior? And I think the answer is no.
I think it's actually worst driver.
Yeah. So that's what I meant in terms of, changing people's behavior. Monetization can help to kind of sway people from one way or the other.
Well, let's be honest. If YouTube creators weren't getting paid, they wouldn't be on there.
I would say that some of them wouldn't be there. A lot of them will still be there.
A lot would be there
because they have nowhere else to share something that would have a lot of mass, audience.
Well, you can share it on Facebook. You can share it on LinkedIn. the reason why YouTube took off back in the day was because people
They were the very first one to actually do the monetization
they're
for
still the
content
only
creators.
ones. I can't think of anybody else really, which kind of boggles my mind why Facebook never got into that. I still don't know why.
You know what? I wouldn't say that they are not yet.
But they've been
Well,
they've been talking about it forever.
Maybe,
I remember 4 years ago.
Maybe that's why Libra is coming out.
I think Libra is going to be one of the most interesting things in the last 10 years.
I know.
I'm super excited for it.
Me too.
Yeah.
I'm super excited about it. Certainly people kind of like, oh, but it's big company, controlling it. And I'm like, you know what? If that means it's going to push adoption
Yes.
of crypto, it's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
What that means is there will be more projects coming up
Yeah.
that actually can leverage some of the learnings from that project.
Yes.
And just become something even more mainstream.
Yeah.
So, I will not be surprised, if monetization on Facebook or on some of these platforms are going to be based on Libra.
Yeah. I actually have a prediction. I think within the next 7 years, maybe a little bit sooner, we'll see a black swan event. We're going to have, I don't like the word decentralized because that can mean anything, but we would have an open system.
Yes.
An open consensus system that would create skin in the game and opportunities for everyone to monetize, whether that's a native token, whether that is a native token as a registered security, I don't know. I'm not getting into legal stuff.
Yeah.
But what I will predict on record is it will be a direct competitor for Facebook.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised. Think about it this way. Right now, if for any content platform, YouTube is one, Facebook it's one, Twitter, even including Wattpad. A lot of the times when we look at monetization or compensation, right now everyone is compensating only the creators.
Mm-hmm.
The audience are just basically
The product for B2B.
no, it's basically giving their time.
Yes.
They may not actually have to pay anything. If you go onto YouTube, you don't pay anything.
Sure, if it's free, you're the product.
It's free,
yeah.
you're the product. But at the same time, think about it. They're actually making use of their time so that these creators can make money.
Mm-hmm.
But what if, imagine one day, these people who actually contributed to the success of these content creators actually have, some share of the success, then all of a sudden things will be very different.
Yeah, there's people in the blockchain space that propose ideas of digitizing IP rights to certain songs, products, etc.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yes. But that's still on the creator side.
Well, I'll give you an example. And we're super early. Like, even, I've been in the space for a while, and I don't think so we're going to see anything really, I want to say meaningful. That's not a good word, but more or less.
Substantial?
Yeah, that's a better word. At least another 3 years.
Yes, I agree.
But for the IP rights, what's interesting, and listen, I got a lot of cool up-and-coming artists in Toronto that I like, all different genres. And I would love to own a little percentage of some of their masters or IPs. Mm-hmm. I support the music anyways. Mm-hmm. If I can throw down, whatever, $1,000, $5,000 to own X, and it's in a smart contract, and I can track my IP, I'll do it in a heartbeat.
Of course. That's basically the whole VC model in terms of you bet on something early on and you take a little bit of ownership, and as soon as it becomes successful, you take a cut of the success because you were there early on. Mm-hmm. That's no different than a VC. But I think what I'm trying to talk about is that right now the mass consumer, they're not necessarily being compensated by the time that they actually have contributed. So, whether this video has been watched, 10 million times and now become one of the most popular video on YouTube, people actually spend the time to do it. So what does that mean? I don't know. Maybe they actually take a little bit of success with it.
Yeah. Well, there's some people trying to do something like you have Brave that's trying to opt in. Like if I see ads, I get paid in the Brave token. You have other platforms like Minds.com.
Yeah. Some people just say, if you answer a survey, you get a token back, to kind of like.
I think that's a flawed system, though. Anytime you ask people to do something for money.
Yeah.
You won't get the right answer.
Exactly.
It's fake data.
Totally.
It's like, what? I can get $10? Yes.
I actually, see, the thing is, funny enough, I actually did a few years of market research between my MBA and between joining Wattpad. And my job was to basically, design surveys, and because I just finished my MBA, so I partner with a professor and kind of like help him in his boutique marketing research firm. And so I know what it means by, surveying people and have to pay people to do it. And yes, they are professional surveyors.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I'm going to quickly shift gears. You've been running Too Small Fish for a while, and Toronto based.
Yes.
Canada always has a running joke. We're like one of the tightest VC type of countries for giving money out or investing, or say deploying capital.
Yeah.
But lately in the last couple of years, Toronto has blossomed, grown a lot. What have you seen lately in the ecosystem as an investor? Not as a founder, but as an investor. Have you seen, can you give us kind of like a 411 diagnosis?
Well, there are certainly many things I see in the ecosystem, and it's very, very interesting. And one thing I really want to highlight is based on, the experience that I have this summer. And so how this started was as I was saying, I left Wattpad 2013, and then I became an angel investor, in 2014, and did a few years of angel investment. I did great in the first few years. So since last year, I started raising my venture fund, and I closed $9 million, my first close this April.
Wow, congrats.
Thank you. So I'm now one of the very few venture capital women general partner in the country. And I'm still racing for my remaining $6 million because my target is $15 million. But what I'm trying to say is that because now that I have a venture fund, it allows me to have a bigger impact in the ecosystem than just an angel. So this summer, I actually spent the summer, since July and all the way to, even last week, travel coast to coast in Canada. So I visited Halifax, I went to Montreal, I went to Ottawa, I went to Calgary, and then most recently, I was in Kelowna, Vancouver. I just see that Canada, it's a very interesting country that different cities, they have different ecosystem, and they are all doing something very interesting. So obviously, Toronto is the most mature when it comes to ecosystem. We have the whole blockchain community because Ethereum was literally born here. We have the AI community because Professor Jeffrey Hinton, had a large discipleship here in Toronto. So we have a lot of those talents. And then, we have a big fintech.
E-commerce,
e-commerce.
Yeah.
Well, that's more like the Ottawa, right? But if we look at the banks, all the headquarters are here in Toronto. If you go into university and Queen's Park, all the big hospitals are here. So you see almost all the little, all the sectors are maturing in the Toronto ecosystem. But if you actually go outside of Toronto, you go see some, the different provinces, every one of them has something very unique. So I was at the Atlantic Canada, for a few times now since last November. I didn't know much about the ecosystem of the Atlantic side until last November. So I was being invited to a conference there to speak as a keynote. And I'm like, if they're going to be inviting me over there, I should at least take a look at it. So, and then I was like, wow, 200 people listening to me to talk about network effect and how did I, create the network effect at Wattpad. And then, they asked very good questions. And then I went back again with Creative Destruction Lab because they have a cohort in Halifax for a few more times. Every time I went there, it's just kind of like, wow, they have something so interesting here that I would have never seen in the rest of the country. Ocean technology. Do you know that there's so much data together in the ocean that the whole world is actually dying to have those data? where is the best place to actually build that kind of technology that can service the world? I would say it's the Maritimes. The Atlantic side of Canada actually have the breadth of scientists there, the knowledge is there, and now that with all the technology investment being put into the ecosystem over there, we are seeing a lot of interesting startups in that space. And then obviously, if you look at the Calgary, the oil industry, they know about innovations, and they had make money in the last few decades. So now, if they want to look at innovations of how to innovate their own industry, or build technology that they know that is going to be up and rising in the energy sector, Calgary is the place to actually foster that ecosystem for those kind of innovations to happen. So same thing, obviously Montreal has a very unique position as a French-speaking, a province, and AI is very strong, and the culture is slightly different because of the francophone there. All I'm trying to say is that these mini ecosystem, all of them actually blossoming. And I see a trend that it will be important for any VCs to be able to support these ecosystem and perhaps even help them to stitch them together. Because right now, if you go to Kelowna, people said that, I don't tend to come to Toronto to raise money because it's like, a 5 hours flight. I may as well just go down south and raise the money. That's a lost opportunity for our country.
Oh, totally.
Right? That's a totally lost opportunity for our country. And same thing, and people in the maritime, in the Atlantic side, they basically, they collaborate a lot. Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, New Brunswick, they do a lot of collaboration, PEI. And when it comes to raising money, they said, sometime we just go New York, because Toronto seems to be very absorbed in their own ecosystem and only look at Toronto. I'm like, no. It's just that, we as VC should actually spend more time to actually look at the bigger picture and being able to place bets in companies that is going to be the next unicorn in our country. So I think that right now with the ecosystem in all these communities are actually blossoming. The province are putting money in there. The local angel investors are putting money in there. More young people and aspire to actually be an entrepreneur. Remember those days when we graduated from school? Our parents is like, go find a job that you can retire in. It's no longer that kind of mentality, right? So young people want to be their own boss. They want to start their own company. They want to do something different and change the world. So I think in general, the whole, I should say the soil is ready to actually kind of like grow the next generation of all the startups here.
So what are action plans to take then from this?
Well, I really think that, if we can actually put together a more collaborative effort between the provinces.
So you want to get the provincial...
you know what? I'm not necessarily, a believer in, getting the big hand, from the government to kind of facilitate that. Because sometimes the way that I looked at it is that governments are great, they can put great instruments to kind of like pull things together. But things has to happen from the grassroots positions. Like think about it, Wattpad. Think about YouTube. It's always the grassroots.
Yes.
It's not like the publishers or, the TV station or the music producers say, go now share on these platforms. It's always grassroots. It's always people who are living and breathing with their problem. And when they saw there's an opportunity or there's a solution that can perhaps lessen their struggle by like 20, 30%, they will be kind of like jumping on the bandwagon and want to make it happen. Because people are problem solvers. We are all creative. We want to kind of solve problems together.
Is there anything that we can take from Silicon Valley or even Israel? I always look at Israel. You have this tiny little country, little dot over there. And they have, you look at the ratio of how many startups are coming out of there. I'm
Yes.
like, what are they doing?
Well, I think, Israel is certainly, it's a very unique example, right? Because the country is so small, the density of the population is more concentrated. And for them, the export has to rely on something that the small piece of land cannot generate a lot. So technology export for them is very important, from an economy perspective. So if I look at Canada, as you said, before the show, it's the second largest in terms of like land in the world. It's good and bad.
Yes.
It's good that because we can rely on our natural resources, every community can kind of survive on their own. Like, British Columbia is happily being British Columbia. The Perrys are happy to be, the Perrys and so on and so forth, right? So they have their own economy to support the local livelihood of the communities that reside in their province, which is good. But at the same time, it's not as good because the collaborations between all these communities are not necessarily putting the support that's necessary to create a common goal. So think about, Shopify. It's I think it's the unicorn that hasn't shown up in the Canadian economy for a long time.
I know.
Right? Which one is the next one? I certainly, hope that Wattpad will be the next one that's coming up, and many others. But what if the entrepreneurs and the VCs have more collaborations, looking at the country as a whole rather than, I'm in the Toronto market, I'm in the Montreal market, or I'm in the Halifax market.
How would we go about doing that? Like, that's what I'm trying to wrap my head around. It's like, do we have a new type of organization that we have?
I don't think it has to be that complicated.
Okay.
I think that, obviously when big planners coming into, these kind of problem solving, they try to kind of put a structure, like an infrastructure to kind of like stitch things around. I think at the bare minimum, it's just very fluid relationship. So what if, DMZ in Ryerson have a partnership or collaboration with the Kelowna Innovation Center?
Yes.
It's as simple as that. So they do actually have, I'm just kind of, picking these two up, names. I don't necessarily mean that you two have to do it if you're listening, but I'm just saying that, just imagine two accelerators, from both ends of the country. They form a partnership and say, you know what, your company is my company is your company. And if they happen to be in Toronto, they don't have to worry about finding a place to meet VCs. They can just be in our facilities. Simple things like that, and if we actually want to have a showcase of our companies that are being, incubated or being, in our accelerators, we have roadshows together. The Kelowna companies and pick 5 companies in the Kelowna, accelerator, and maybe 10 companies in DMC because they are slightly bigger. The 15 of them, they do a roadshow and, to go meet investors in Calgary and then go meet, investors in Montreal. I think that's a very organic way of doing it without like a specific infrastructure to have a mandate to put these things together. So, it's a mindset.
Yeah, so
it's a thinking.
We'll have a new group called the Roadshow Capital. So we'll go city to city.
Yeah, that would be fun.
That's right,
That would be fun.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. I think, like I said earlier, I think Canada's prime, specifically, well, I'm just biased because we're here in Toronto, but the action happening here is amazing. Right?
Yes, and imagine this, Ameer. If all the experts and all the talent that we are here in Toronto, we don't even necessarily have to go outside, to travel to other ecosystems. We have the internet.
Yes.
Think about if the ecosystem here in Toronto have some sort of, I'm not saying that they don't have the willingness, but have that kind of initiative or tiny project and say like, look, we want to perhaps have a webcast about this topic, for everyone in the ecosystem. Then obviously on the internet, everybody can consume. But
Yes.
if we actually make it a more collaborated effort that we say, we notify the Innovation Center in Kelowna, we notify the Innovation Center in Regina, we'll go have, tell the accelerator in New Brunswick that we will have this show on this day at this time. Anybody want to do it, watch it. I'm not saying that people are not doing this right now, but I'm saying that people are not doing it in a very, planned out way. They just kind of like, yes, we have material, we put it on the web
Yeah.
and people will read it. Think about, all the reader and writers on Wattpad. It's like, I have the stories, I put it up and pray that people will read it. Versus those ones and say, I'm going to go target, this writing group and say, hey, I have just written a story on Wattpad. You want to kind of go critique it. And then you go to another writing group and say, look, this is what I've written on Wattpad. You want to take a look and give me some feedback. And all of a sudden, maybe not all of them will go.
Yeah.
But if 10% of them actually did it, they can bring those learning back to their own community.
I agree. I do have one question, though. And a lot of my friends, they have the network. They know the investors here, both angels and VCs, you name it, but they get better terms down south.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
They get better terms. I don't blame them. Founder wants better terms.
But at the same time, the way that I looked at it is that there's always a two side of a story. I just found that, the Valley, they certainly have a lot more capital, from just the economy perspective.
They've been longer.
They've been longer. They, so for them to actually, bet on terms and things like that, it's great. But I think what it comes down to is that it's always looking at people who can add value to your company.
Yeah, you don't want dumb money. You want smart money.
Right. So sometimes I just feel that, obviously if they can find better partners, they feel that, the people, they are raising money from have the experience or expertise can help them. If they can find them, in the
Yes.
South, go for it. I'm not saying that, let's keep everything in Canada. Like the entrepreneur has to do what is good for them.
Yeah.
It's a survival game.
Yeah.
If they cannot, partner with, themselves with someone that actually can, help them to the next step, then it's meaningless.
I also have cognitive dissonance when it comes to, I have a hard time wrapping my head around from a founder's perspective where it's like, okay, you're doing a Series A, whatever series, and you're valuing it at X. The amount of value you got to return for that valuation is ridiculous. And for me, I'm like, is that company really worth that much?
That's exactly my point.
Really?
This is exactly my point, that I was trying to get to. Valuation, good terms, I think everybody wants. But usually what I recommend entrepreneur is to think 3 rounds ahead. Because let's say I have seen companies that have some good traction, not ginormous good traction that people have to die to get in, but it's good. They have, a few 100,000 users in an early product and actively engaging. And then people say, you know what, with this, I can easily go to the Valley and raise, $10 million on a 30 million valuation. I'm like, good for you if that's what you're looking for. But what I would be very concerned about is, if you have 300,000 users
Yes.
for this round, you probably want an up round. Next time.
Yes.
You're already at 30 in valuation. You probably want to be at 50. How many users you have to grow from 300,000 users to 50 valuation? You probably will have to be 10x to at least 3 million.
Minimum. And those are active users, not just users.
Then
logging in.
Do you really know? Do they really know in the next 18 months? Because that's pretty much the next round.
Yeah.
In terms of time frame.
Yeah.
That you can grow. And I think the way that I looked at it is coming back to the very first point you asked me at the beginning of the show is how much money did Wattpad spend?
Yes.
In marketing. If you're going to raise $10 million, $8 million is going to go back to Google and Facebook.
Right away. Yeah.
You actually may not actually have a product that has a product market fit.
Totally.
Then you have just burned $8 million to grow your user base from 300 to maybe 600, and you are far from the 3 million mark that you need to raise a $50 million round. So what that means is you probably have a down round.
Yeah.
That will look so bad.
Right. I actually have a theory. I think the approach we've seen last year, specifically since SoftBank came in, of the crazy valuations, I think that's slowly going to be going away, especially now with what everyone's seeing happening with WeWork.
Yes.
And, when I first got introduced to VC space years ago and I started understanding it and reading about it and talking to some people and then looking at business model, call me simple, but I like profits. And when I see some of these companies, I'm like, am I living in a cuckoo house? No, I'm like, serious. Like, I get the model. Sure, you want to go IPO. I get it. I understand it.
Yeah.
I understand it.
Yeah.
I get it. I get it. But you're not making any money.
Right. So that's why for those opportunity, it has to be reasonable in terms of, valuation. Right? Think about Wattpad in the early days. We were making $2, $5 away from break even, but that was the beginning. But even when we raised Series A, we were making decent money.
Yeah.
It's all ad supported. But if we need to step on the gas to hire more engineers,
Yes.
Make the app much better, that would right away put us back to the red. So we do actually need that kind of capital infusion to scale the company.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right, it's not sustainable to continue to be on the red for like God knows how many years, right? So it's important, but I think it depending on the business, especially if it is B2B.
Yes.
You must have a margin. That margin has to be able to do something.
Honestly, the older I get in businesses, I like B2B more and more. The sales cycle is longer.
Yeah.
But if you can get into like legacy contracts and get some of these like upfront, it's like such a big cash infusion.
Right.
It's an easier sales cycle for me.
I know what
even
you
though
mean.
it's a 10-month sales cycle, but
I
it's
know
easier.
See, the thing is, what I really get me more interested in the B2B is the data network effect.
Yes.
I think that, a lot of businesses these days are using tools. I use this tool to do this. I use this tool to do that. So eventually, I just feel that if for any innovation, it's just making the transaction faster, increase the productivity, a little bit more by a margin. It always a race to the bottom. Meaning that you're always competing with the next with the next B2B application with more features and lower price point. It's always about
It's a commodity.
It's a commodity. But the thing is, if we look at Slack, it's all of a sudden a very different beast.
Yeah, Slack's interesting to me,
It's
especially since Microsoft.
Yeah,
So
it's the whole network that is being built upon.
Yes.
And I think a lot of B2B these days is particularly, Slack, it's a social layer type network that we're talking about. But I'm talking about actually a lot of the B2B these days actually making use of the data analytics and be kind of data network effect based company using AI. So all of a sudden you see people using this tool, they are doing this, they're gathering more data, and then all of a sudden department to department type collaboration, they may not actually collaborate on a social layer, but because they need the data to collaborate, then all of a sudden the tool helps them create a data network that they collaborated on top. That is going to be the differentiator, because even if there's another tool, coming in and say, we are $5 cheaper per users, and we have more features. You can change the color of the background, that kind of stuff. It doesn't matter, because now that this company, it's literally locked based on the data insight.
Yeah, that's a stickiness.
That this B2B tool.
Yeah.
Great. So those are the B2B type of companies that I'm extremely interested in.
Yeah, paying attention to those.
Yes.
I'll share one after the...
Please.
I'll share something with you.
Please.
I think we're wrapping it up over here. Thank you for sharing everything.
Well, thanks for having me here.
I appreciate it so much. If people want to get to know about you and Two Small Fish and Ventures, what's the best resource?
Well, certainly go into my site, www.twosmallfish.vc. You have almost all the information about the portfolio companies that we have invested in, our investment thesis and things like that. I engage on social media very often, Twitter, LinkedIn, Wattpad. If you want to share your romance stories with me, you can totally do that on Wattpad. And Instagram, many different channel you can reach to me.
Awesome. All right, guys, go check out Eva and don't forget to subscribe. Talk to you guys soon. Later.